This session for youth workers is on finding your focus, discovering exactly what is your purpose for the ministry that you do. Doug Fields, author and longtime youth pastor, he estimates that less than 10% of youth workers can articulate why their ministry exists. That's just too much. That's too ridiculous. Just 10%. So I've got to ask you questions. What is your purpose for your student ministry? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want your students to become? I like to brainstorm these questions with different youth workers when I go and speak to them, talk to them. And the brainstorming question is, tell me, after having students in your youth ministry for 3 years or 5 years or 6 years through middle school and high school, what is it that you want them to become? How do you want people to describe them? And you know what? Answers that I get with youth workers are things like disciples of Jesus Christ, lovers of God, lovers of the Word, servant leaders. Those are the kind of answers I get. But if I were to brainstorm that with parents, a lot of times the answers are different. Parents might say, I want my student to be safe. I want them to be with responsible adults who actually really, really care about them and will be concerned about them. I want them to be kept from doing anything that could cause them to have scars that they'll have to live with for the rest of their lives, that they might not make those kind of poor moral choices. And so they've got their ideas, parents do. And then if I were to ask students, and I've done this with students before, their answers are much more relational. I want a place where I can go to with my friends, and I can bring friends to it, and just a place that's safe and a good environment, a fun environment, but also a place where we can talk about things that are real. Talk about things that might be a little deeper in my life, and it's okay to talk about those things. And so I've got to ask you, what about you and your group of youth workers that maybe you're even watching this with? What is that you want your students to become? I'd encourage you to stop and brainstorm that a little bit. Determine what your students ought to be. Now, Fields also, along with the church that he was a part of for many years, Saddleback Community, they put together, or they put in writing first, I guess, these 5 purposes that the church has to accomplish. Purposes of discipleship, fellowship, evangelism, ministry, and worship. I like using terms that might be a little more youth ministry friendly. I'd use love God, love others, grow, reach out, and serve. But no matter which terms you use, you've got to ask yourself, is my church, is my youth ministry reaching or attaining those things as purposes for my ministry? Those are very solid biblical issues that we need to aim for. It's interesting that in 10 years of teaching youth ministry at Ozark Christian College, it didn't take me too long to figure out that most of the students that I talk to, it doesn't matter how much time we spend preparing and talking and teaching about certain things, they will still end up doing youth ministry most likely exactly as youth ministry was done for them when they were in high school or junior high. Now that can be good or bad, depending on if the youth ministry they were in was good or bad. And yet, even if they came from a really, really solid youth ministry, one of the things that I want to do in my classes is just get them to think, get them to discover, what is it that I want to accomplish here? And how am I going to get them there? I don't want them to just do what they've always done. I want them to think about how they can get it done. The problem is that youth ministers get so overwhelmed. They have so many things to do, so many students to go see, issues that they're running into, meetings that they have to hold, that a lot of times, instead of spending time really determining what their purpose is, their youth ministry is run by the calendar. I've got to get ready for Sunday. I've got 3 days to do that. Now I've got to get ready for Wednesday night. Now I've got to get ready for the Friday night activity we've got going on. Oh, I've got to get ready for camp coming up. I've got to get ready for this retreat, this event. We're just run by the calendar instead of purposefully finding focus for our ministry. Let me illustrate it this way. Let's stop and consider, what are the primary ministries or ministry pieces that your youth ministry has? What are the programs that your youth ministry has? Well, one of them would be events. So I'll just put that right here, and we're going to make a list. All right, events. I think another thing that would be in here is worship or youth group. We'll put down youth group next. Another piece might be a youth worship service, so I'll write that down here if you have that. Some churches have their own youth worship services, some don't. But then there's also some kind of small group that takes place a lot of times at your youth group time. Maybe it's just 10, 15 minutes of discussing things. After small group, let's see, we would also have camps and retreats. I think you can build your ministry on camps and retreats throughout the year. Camps and retreats. A lot of churches still have what they call Sunday school or Bible study on Sunday morning. Let's see. Service projects. Mission trips. And disciple groups. I'll just put D groups, all right? And so these are kind of the typical programs we'll see in a lot of churches. Now, not every church has every one of these, and some may have more. I would tell you, again, write down what are all the programs that we offer. And maybe you even list every one of your events. What do you do with those? And then I would tell you to stop and consider, okay, what is the purpose for each one of these? Now, your purpose for events might be outreach. Now, some events are done for other reasons, but a lot of them are, let me put something together that you can bring your friends to, and hopefully you'll have a good time. Youth group, most youth groups, I've asked over and over, what's your main purpose? And some of them have a lot of purposes to them, but their main purpose almost always falls under fellowship. It's a very relational ministry. Worship, I think we know what that is. The purpose there, of course, is to honor God, come closer to Him. Small groups at youth group time, where you're just meeting for 10, 15, 20 minutes, that's usually life application. You're applying the message to their life at the time. Camps and retreats, there are a lot of individual purposes, specific purpose for these, but I like to call camps and retreats catalysts for growth. Because these really will push your students a little deeper and to want to know more and grow more in their walk with God. Sunday school or Bible study, the purpose there is usually education. Some might call it discipleship. Some might just say it's Bible study. Service project, that's ministry. Getting them to serve. The mission trips, that's missions mindset, global mindset, maybe to create missionaries. D groups, the last one here is accountability. And mentoring. So you stop and ask yourself exactly what are the purpose for each one of these things, and you put a purpose down for it. Now, you know what? The purpose may vary a little bit here and there, but this is generally speaking what you might have, what you might end up with. And it's good to have a purpose. One huge problem in programming is when we try to when our purpose is just unclear. Let me give you 4 examples how that happens in student ministry, 4 common examples. One is when we try to do all 5 purposes in the same program. I still remember talking to a youth pastor, and I said, so, we've got worship, discipleship, evangelism, ministry, and fellowship. Which one of these is your main purpose for your youth group on Wednesday nights? And he said, well, actually, all of those. We do all of those. And I said, well, I understand that you probably do some of all of those, but what is your focus purpose for that? Well, it's all those. And I'm just going to tell you, no, it's not. You can't. You can't focus on all 5 of those. You're going to give a little bit to each one. And so I would tell you that most groups, they focus on fellowship first, and then the other pieces just kind of fall in there. What if your focus was fellowship? Well, you know what? Then you spend a lot of time on that. You talk about it. You have them in the small groups. Even your activities, your games, your interactions, the time before and after youth group, the food time, that would all be focused on getting to know students, relational ministry. The second problem when your purpose becomes unclear is just a confused purpose. And this happens a lot with small groups. With small groups, we tend to say, well, our small groups are all about discipleship. Well, you know what? If they're only meeting for 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes on a Wednesday night after a message, that's not really their purpose. Their purpose is life application of the message. Because discipleship's not going to happen in a 20-minute time span. When you've got 7 students one week, 17 the next, 13 the next, 25 the next, you're not going to get that mentoring taking place in that kind of situation. The third most common issue is when we use the wrong measuring sticks. And what I mean by that is I still remember a youth pastor named Brian who was very frustrated with his Sunday morning Sunday school class or his Bible study because he just wasn't having the numbers at that he wanted to have. Well, that's because he was using the same measuring stick for this that he was using for this, for his youth group, the same measuring stick, and you can't. This one's about outreach. You're supposed to be bringing your friends. You're supposed to have more persons. This one's supposed to be a little bit deeper. It's probably not going to be for everyone. And it's in the morning. There's a lot of people who don't want to get up in the morning. And so you may not have your big crowd there. So understand that your purposes may be different instead of confusing them and using the wrong measuring sticks. And finally, a fourth common problem is when a program loses its purpose. You know what? Having purposes set is going to help you to understand when it is that you can cut a program. For instance, a friend of mine named Dan was a youth pastor for a long time, and he had a Friday night thing that was meant for students to come to and bring their friends to. It was an outreach event for them to bring friends to after ball games. And he found out, and they did it for a couple of years, and finally realized, you know what, we're really not getting students to bring their friends. When they do bring friends, they're friends that go to another church, and so we're really not really reaching out to anyone other than people who are already being reached at other churches. And so, you know what, this is not reaching its purpose anymore. Let's get rid of this program and put something else in its place. It helps you determine when you can and can't replace a program. I could go on, but I think you understand. Here's the simple thing of put a purpose to your program. One of the most helpful ways to determine this is with the youth ministry funnel. And so let me draw this here. And I'm going to guess that some of you have seen this before. Youth ministry funnel, and to use the terminologies that Saddleback uses, I'm going to describe the church in 5 different ways. First, you've got your community. The community is the people, the students that live within, a 15, 25, maybe 30-minute radius of your church. They don't come to your church yet, but you're trying to get them there. And so one of the ways you try to get them there is through events. All right. The next level down here is the crowd. The crowd are people who show up every now and then. Maybe they come to your youth activities maybe once a month. They're not really regular attenders yet, but they're there now and then. And you know what? My purpose, my way to reach them, I'm going to try to set up something that they can come to and feel comfortable every time. And so that's what youth group is about. I want them to be a part of that. Or maybe even my Sunday morning worship services. I want them to feel comfortable. It's going to be aimed more at those persons. The next group is your congregation. Now, these are people who actually show up on a semi-regular basis. You know, maybe they're there 2 to 3 times a month. That's pretty regular. And honestly, youth group's for them too. But, well, now I'm going to say that youth group is really aimed at them as well. But so are your small groups here, your life application. Your camps and retreats, they're for everyone. Your Sunday school and Bible study, they're for your congregation. The next group is your committed. And then finally is your core students. Your committed service project is aimed at your congregation. You're committed, you're really aiming your service projects, you're aiming your missions trips. Your D groups are aimed at your core. Your D groups are a small group of students, maybe, 4, 5, 6 students that meet with one adult every week for an entire school year for the purpose of mentoring and accountability. It's definitely got a deeper push and level to it. And as you see in this funnel, the funnel obviously gets narrower as it goes down, and what that means is you're probably going to have more people, more potential people coming to these events here than you might for these down here. As a matter of fact, this one down here at the bottom, and maybe your mission trips, it's really not designed for the crowd or the community. We've got things designed for them, but probably not our discipleship groups, probably not our mission trips. Now, our service projects, yeah, there's a difference there. You can work on that, work that out. And so you can see that there's a greater, besides being wider at the top, there's less commitment involved at the top. And down at the bottom, there's much more commitment because you're asking a student to be there every week for this. You're asking them to give themselves more when they begin serving in the church and become part of it. And so less commitment at the top, more commitment at the bottom. And down at the bottom, your goal at the end of the funnel is disciples. As we said earlier, lovers of God, lovers of the Word, servant leadership, those kind of things. And this does not mean that worship won't take place for the committed and core. Matter of fact, these students down here, they ought to be up here at youth group stuff. They ought to be there every time, just as persons who are helping and being a part of that. But not everything is designed for every specific person. You'll also notice that evangelism is pretty heavy at the top. And then worship and fellowship are right in here. And then ministry and discipleship are down here at the bottom. This is just helping you find a focus for your programming, for what you're wanting to accomplish in your youth ministry, your programming. For students desiring depth at youth group, point them to the discipleship groups. They're not for everyone. So let me wrap this session up with just a few questions. Why does your student ministry exist? Why do you do what you do? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want your students to become? You need to answer that. And when you have a specific targeted goal, there's a much better chance that you're going to meet that. Consider how each component of your ministry will work in getting the students from here, from outside the church, down to becoming disciples of Jesus Christ. How are you going to do that? How will your youth group do that? How will your small group ministry move them towards that? I would even tell you for every event that you do, why is it that you do each one of these events? Stop and think about that. Student ministry is so much fun. It's incredible. It's awesome to see kids coming to Jesus that are broken and they're healed and their lives are changed. It's amazing to see the growth that takes place in a student's life. And there's a much greater chance that you're going to see some of these things happen if we can be truly focused on moving them in that direction.